Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, a stunning by-election upset for the Liberal Party in the Ontario riding of Toronto-St. Paul's. And it's one that raises questions about the future of Justin Trudeau. A riding held by the Liberals for more than 30 years has flipped to the Conservatives. What does this mean for Trudeau's future as Liberal leader? And what does the Conservative win mean for that party? We'll be joined by two former political strategists, and we'll take your calls. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. And you can call us now on our top story. What does the Toronto-St. Paul's by-election result mean for Justin Trudeau's future? Should he step down as Liberal leader before the election? What does this Conservative win mean for that party? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also dial 1-800-825-5950, or you can hit pound 690 or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, this morning's news headlines did not paint a good picture for the future of Prime Minister Trudeau.
Breaking news in the closely watched federal by-election of Toronto-St. Paul's. Conservative Don Stewart has won the longtime Liberal stronghold.
It's raising questions, though, about the tenability of Justin Trudeau's leadership of the Liberal Party, and he's in Vancouver today, in fact, and here's what he said about that.
This was obviously not the result we wanted, but I want to be clear that I hear people's concerns and frustrations. These are not easy times, and it's clear that I and my entire Liberal team have much more work to do to deliver tangible, real progress that Canadians across the country can see and feel. We'll never stop working and fighting to make sure that people have what they need to get through these tough times. My focus is on your success, and that's where it's going to stay.
Not everyone agrees, though, that Trudeau himself should stay. And privately, some Liberal MPs are calling for a change in leadership. This as they turn their eyes toward a general election next year. So what do you think? Should Justin Trudeau step down as Liberal leader before the next election? What do last night's results mean for the future of his leadership? And what does the Conservatives' by-election win mean for that party? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone, or you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. And my guests for this hour are two former political insiders. Rachel Siegel is a former senior staff for BC United, and she served in various policy roles in the Stephen Harper government. She's now founder and CEO of Beyond a Ballot. And Amanda Alvaro is former senior communications advisor to Justin Trudeau's Liberal leadership bid and his party's election campaign. They are now co-hosts of a podcast called Beyond a Ballot. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi, Amanda.
And you know each other well, I know. I don't know when the last time you spoke was. Probably yesterday.
3 hours, maybe an hour ago.
I should also just welcome you, Amanda. We haven't spoken before, but I'll ask you now. What do you think? Should Trudeau stay or go?
Well, I think that decision can't be made off the back of one by-election, especially a by-election where the results were razor thin. I mean, this was going to be as close as any by-election we've seen. And had the Liberals won by 600 votes, we'd be having the same conversation. I think that this is a very, very winnable riding. And I think in a general election, which is still 15 months away, there's a lot of time for the party to get there. They have a formidable candidate in Leslie Church, who we know personally. We actually interviewed on our podcast. So no, I don't think that decision should be made on the back of that. I think that there's clearly, there's a lot of anxiety in the country around a lot of issues. And I think a lot of that has fallen on the Prime Minister's shoulders. He certainly has some work to do to either, some people are saying regain trust or remind Canadians of what the party, what the government has brought to them, but he has a lot of time to do that. And I still think he's the person best positioned to lead the party into the next election.
Rachel, a lot of that anger and anxiety falling on the Prime Minister's shoulders. Do you think fairly so?
I think Amanda's right to say that. I think that a lot of people that were interviewed yesterday that said they are typical Liberal voters and now they've gone over to the Conservative side felt disenfranchised by the Prime Minister himself. And a lot of the worry that we're seeing today, interesting for me, is the fact that the Liberal brand has taken such a hit. And so when we talk about whether or not the Prime Minister should resign, what we're hearing from Liberal Party members is that they're worried that if the Prime Minister continues, then the Liberal Party will continue to decline. And so without the Prime Minister leaving, which he said very openly he will not be doing.
Many times,
Many times, including here in Vancouver, he said at his conference earlier today. But what does that mean as we get closer to a general? And will he continue to harm the party more than he's helping it? Because last night showed us that he might.
Okay, so two different takes here, right? From Amanda saying lots of time to change people's minds, and Rachel saying lots of time to continue to anchor people. So we're asking you, what do you think last night's by-election, as Amanda said, razor thin, 42% for the Conservative candidate to about 40% of the votes for the Liberal candidate, but still a stunning upset, a swing to the Conservative Party in that riding of Toronto-St. Paul after decades of being a Liberal stronghold. So we're asking you, what does this mean for the future of Justin Trudeau? Should he step down as leader before the next election? And what do you think this Conservative win means for that party? Our numbers are 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. And my guests, Rachel Siegel and Amanda Alvaro. Amanda, by the way, is now CEO of Pomp and Circumstance Communication, co-founder and president. Ben is calling us. Let's head to the northeast at Fort St. John. Hi, Ben.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think it's a big shock, number one, based on the trends of the last year and a half or so. But I think the point I'd probably like to make would be that I think that the Liberal Party, has to shift its focus now from trying to win the next federal election. I'll also preface this call by saying I am a none-of-the-above guy when it comes to candidates at the federal level. This is just an opinion. So
sure. And this is a place to share it. Yeah, go ahead.
There you go. But basically, I think they have to shift their focus from trying to win the next election to being wiped out. I think that the most viable strategy for them going forward would be to try to hold the Conservative win to a minority win next October, if that's when the election is. And at that time, implement a new leader, because I think Trudeau will give them the best chance to at least hold on to, or trying to hold on to a little bit of what they got and holding the Conservatives to a minority. And then he steps down. They thank him for his service. And then implement or, put in a new leader. And then at the first opportunity they have to bring down the government in a non-confidence vote, bring them down, and we'll be back at the polls in 2026. That's what I think is going to happen.
Okay. Ben, you've thought this through. Thanks so much for the call. That's Ben in Fort St. John. What do you think strategy-wise, Amanda? Is that the long game?
Well, listen, I think that, when you look at the Conservatives up in the polls by 20 points, by all intents and purposes, you may have felt like they should have absolutely eviscerated in this by-election. And again, this was a razor thin
Rachel
win
is shaking her head here. Okay, go ahead. Continue, though.
Rachel and I have lots to disagree on, but we agree on more than we disagree on.
It's true.
But I'll say this, so it was razor thin, and it could have gone either way. And there's a lot of time left. In a by-election, you have, there were 30,000 people who came out to vote. In a general, it's closer to 60,000 in that riding. So this could also be a wake-up call for all the progressives who want to stop a Poilievre majority or stop a Poilievre government from taking form. So there's, again, a lot of time to convince Canadians, to remind Canadians what's at stake, and to get out to the polls in a general election. But this wasn't an evisceration. This was as close as it could have possibly gone. And I think that can actually bode well for the Liberals when we look across the country, not only at strongholds, but areas where there have been a lot of swing votes in the past.
Okay, Rachel?
Okay, I want to remind people that this riding has been held by the Liberals since 1988. In 2011, when the Liberals lost most of their seats, they went down to 34 seats. Toronto St. Paul's was one of those seats. So we all remember Michael Ignatieff. And after that election, the party was, some would say, decimated. One of the seats that remained was Toronto St. Paul's. So the fact that we're even sitting here and talking about a Conservative win, if you look at the electoral map of Toronto today that's going around the internet, it's a giant red circle with now a blue dot in the middle. And that is unbelievable. I, for one, woke up this morning shocked.
And so what is that a bellwether of? What does that actually
It's a
signal?
bellwether of how Canadians are feeling. It's a bellwether of how Canadians feel that this prime minister, that this government has handled a lot of major issues over the last 9 years. It's a bellwether of the fact that this government is no longer leading. It's no longer communicating properly. And this also, 15% of this riding is members of the Jewish community. And this is a bellwether of the fact that they felt that the steps that this government has taken in regards to the Gaza-Israel crisis probably also wasn't the right direction for them to be heading in terms of where the Jewish community expected their government to support them. We saw Pierre Poilievre in Mount Royal last week with massive audiences. I have cousins in Mount Royal that went to see Pierre Poilievre that have never stepped foot at a Conservative rally, and they were in tears saying, thank you for that support. And I think last night was a huge barometer on where the Jewish community in Canada is in terms of their relationship with this government.
And so, Amanda, you said earlier that falls on the shoulders of Justin Trudeau. So at what point, we also have the rumblings around MPs themselves. At what point does a leader just have to say, you know what, for the good of the party, it's time that I step down. I am a distraction. I am seen as now, a deficit to this party.
Well, I'll concede that the conditions aren't favorable for the party right now. But again, it's 15 months away. If you look at 15 months ago, this wasn't the position of these particular parties. A lot can change. And we're going to talk about bellwethers.
But what needs to happen to change that? What needs to happen to change that?
If I could just finish my point, that the bellwether barometer yesterday or overnight was really that this is a country divided. This wasn't, a slam dunk. This was people who definitely feel like they want to send a message, certainly, but this wasn't a massive slaughter by any stretch of the imagination. So there's a lot of room there. There's a lot of progressives who don't want to put things like $10 day childcare at stake, or pharmacare at stake, or dental care at stake, or CPP at stake. There's a lot of progressives who want to ensure that those things are in place. So what does the prime minister specifically have to do? He has to remind Canadians what is at stake, that these are the things. You may be disappointed in some things, but there may be other issues that are really critical to you. And it's now time. Poilievre has spent most of his time attacking those policies, attacking those issues. Now he's going to be forced to present to Canadians what it is that he has to stand for, and whether or not Canadians are going to buy into that.
I think that's an interesting point, too, when we look at the progressive vote when it comes to the NDP and the NDP turnout last night. So it was really low. I mean, that's a provincially held NDP seat. And so the fact that the NDP wasn't able to bring out their voters
11%,
11%, which is much lower. I think they had 20% in the last election. That's also a question about why they don't feel motivated to come out and vote for Jagmeet Singh, and whether or not he can rally some of that communication around those social programs like dental care and try and pull some of that support around away from the Liberals, as they have that supply and confidence agreement that has really helped propel those social programs.
Let's take another call here. Thanks, both of you, Amanda Alvaro and Rachel Siegel, my two guests here. Both are co-hosts of the Beyond a Ballot podcast, and both former political strategists, former political senior communications to Justin Trudeau's Liberal leadership bid, Amanda Alvaro, and also now head of founder and president of Pomp and Circumstance, and Rachel Siegel is the CEO of Beyond a ballot, and former senior director with BC United and staffer under Stephen Harper's government as well. And we're taking your calls. Should Justin Trudeau, does he need to step down as Liberal leader before the next election? What do you think the Conservative Party win means for the Conservatives as we head into that election? Rob is on the line now from Vancouver. Hi, Rob.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. Thanks for calling. What do you think? What needs to be the next steps taken here?
Well, I think, as others have said, one riding is not enough to, really predict what's going to happen in the election. And it sounds like it was a close election result. But obviously, the Conservatives are way up in the polls. What I find kind of interesting or confusing so far is why the Liberals aren't doing a better job of communicating their message. It seems to me, based on just anecdotal evidence, the main point that the Conservatives are gaining ground on with most people, besides those who, believe that the vaccines are, evil conspiracy, is the carbon tax and inflation. But and Poilievre blames that all the inflation on Trudeau and the carbon tax. So why aren't the Liberals just hammering home the message to remind everyone, hey, the inflation was a global issue caused by the economy bouncing back after COVID. Number two, the Bank of Canada said in last September that the carbon tax added 0.15%, so 0.15% to the inflation rate. So if the Conservatives had simply axed the tax, what would that have done for that worst year where we had, almost 8% inflation? And then finally say, well, what else would they do? And I don't hear the Liberals hammering home these messages very much. So I don't know why they're not doing that. I mean, I haven't heard them bring up this 0.15% very much.
Rob, thank you very much. Very interesting question there. Amanda Alvaro, does the communications of, with regard to the carbon tax, with regard to causes behind inflation, need to be stepped up?
Well, first of all, Rob, congrats on those messages. Like, that was great. Maybe the Liberal Party should give him a call. I agree with a lot of what Rob said. And I think that, listen, what we have found, and something that Rachel and I have talked about and will agree on, is that the Conservatives have done a formidable job of communications. They've really simplified a message. They've tapped into people's fears and anxieties at a time when things like affordability have been so critical. What does it feel like in my pocketbook? How does it feel like when I'm shopping? And some of those things are really out of the control of the government policies, as Rob has laid out. So it's very easy to put the government in the corner or to play the blame game and to make sure that everything falls at the feet of the Prime Minister. It's very hard to battle back from that. So while they are delivering some of those messages, they don't have the same breakthrough quality. I do think that the Liberals, over the next number of months as we head into election, will likely change their communication strategy, really highlighting the things that they've brought to fruition and reminding Canadians, again, what's at stake. What do they stand for? What does Poilievre stand for? And where do you fall?
Okay, we're going to continue to take your calls throughout this hour. Really want to thank my guests, Rachel Siegel and Amanda Alvaro, for spending the hour with us as we take your reaction and your thoughts as to what last night's by-election results mean for the future of Justin Trudeau's leadership as of the Liberal Party heading into the next election, should he step down, and what does this Conservative Party win mean for them? Our numbers again, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. It's 12:24 Pacific time. So if Justin Trudeau were to step down as Liberal leader, who would take his place? Well, journalist Paul Wells is the author of Justin Trudeau on the Ropes, Governing in Troubled Times. He spoke to Stephen Quinn on CBC's The Early Edition this morning.
We're hearing staunch support for Trudeau from his inner circle. From the outer circles of the Liberal Party, there's a lot of interest in Mark Carney, who's seen as a more serious fellow. There's a lot of interest in Sean Fraser, who is seen as more of a scrapper and more sure of himself in the gladiatorial setting of question period. And I mean, I don't want to lean too heavily on polls, but we're in new territory here. And the recent polling I've seen suggests none of these people automatically increases the Liberal vote.
That's interesting. Does Mark Carney want the job?
I have come to believe that he sure does. He's been much more active on always in settings where he would have a certain plausible deniability, but he's given more speeches about Canadian politics in the last 2 months than in the 10 years before.
But when you put those people up to, when you ask people whether those would change their opinions of the Liberals or improve Liberal fortunes, the answer is no.
I mean, I don't like to cheer for either side, but what I hear from people who are used to voting Liberal is it's not the personality, it's not the name of the Liberal leader, it's the style of government, a certain refusal to listen and adjust and admit fallibility. And there's a kind of a widespread sense that that's become contagious among Liberal leadership candidates. Again, with the partial exception of Mark Carney, who's just a very peculiar case.
Paul Wells is the author of Justin Trudeau on the Ropes, Governing in Troubled Times. He spoke to Stephen Quinn on the early edition this morning. This is BC Today on CBC, and we are taking your calls this hour after last night's by-election upset for the Liberal Party in an Ontario riding of Toronto-St. Paul. What do you think? What do you think this means for the future of Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader? Should he step down before the next general election? And what does this Conservative win mean for that party? 604-669-3733. 1-800-825-5950. You can email too, bctoday@cbc.ca. And Tyler's on the line in Hope. Hi, Tyler. Welcome. Hi, Tyler. Are you there? Okay, we've lost our connection with Tyler. My apologies. Helena is on the line in Kamloops. Hi, Helena.
Hey.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. I was thinking about tsunami. You know, when a tsunami comes, it's quiet and it's still. And she was talking about it's a slim margin and it doesn't mean much. But I think a tidal wave is coming, and that Justin Trudeau unfortunately might be living in an echo chamber with yes men surrounding him, and as such, he's probably not going to step down because he's not going to hear anyone saying, "Oh yes, you should step down," because why surround yourself with people who disagree with you? So I think he really needs to, if he was a humble man and aware of how Canadians were feeling, I think he would be aware and say, okay, I hear the call. It's a whispering, like COVID, it's a whispering, but it becomes gigantic. I'm going to hear the whisper and I'm going to acquiesce and thank you for my time and step down.
Why do you think a tsunami is coming?
Well, I read a lot of social internet, and I have the pulse. Like, I try to feel the energy of what people are complaining about, and I think he represents everything that people are tired of, and so they are wanting change. And unfortunately, it may not be the best change, but people are just, and so I don't want to get ignorant, but. He represents power, privilege, distanced pretty boy, and people are dealing with street crime and rates of addiction and people getting released, and they see him as being, I think, out of touch, and so are just, targeting him.
Helena, thank you so much for that point. And let's put it to Amanda Alvaro, more philosophical here. What are the questions that goes through a leader's mind? You've worked with Justin Trudeau. What are the questions running through his mind right now in light of last night, do you think?
I have no idea what questions are going through his mind, but I would say, I thought it was interesting listening to Paul Wells talking about what the alternative could be and looking at some of the names that have been bandied about, the idea of a Carney or some of the existing candidates or MPs. And when you put those names in front of people, what you find yourself with is the challenge of name recognition. Who are these people? So we have 15 months to the general election. If you can imagine, if a leadership race had to be held, not only would you have to go through the leadership race, but then you'd also have to get Canadians familiar with that person. That's a lot to ask for in a 15-month period. So I think there's a lot of calculation, I would imagine, that goes into a current leader's mind how do you leave the best party in the best position? How do you fight the next election with the best shot at winning? And if what Paul Wells is saying and some of those numbers are true, it doesn't look like there's a candidate in the wings who's suddenly the savior. And I think that that's what we always look for. And that can be really damaging. And I'll give one quick example. Rachel and I, we interviewed Kim Campbell when the Mulroney government was, they were falling apart. Their numbers were in the gutter. She won that leadership race 4 months before an election. She ended up losing the election spectacularly, wore that on her shoulders. Really, the party was headed that way anyways, and we didn't get our shot at having, the woman prime minister really have a fair runway. So I think that could be a challenge for anyone who's looking at the leadership right now as well.
And I can go back to you after our news update here. I know Rachel's wanting to respond as well. And just for people's reference, when Amanda's talking about what Paul Wells was referring to, that's an interview this morning as well that was on the early edition. And he talked about other names that have been thrown about as possible successors, including Sean Fraser, immigration housing minister now, and Mark Carney, former Bank of Canada governor. It is 12:31 now. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC. You can catch us on YouTube as well, or you can use your CBC News app. We'll get right back to our conversation with our two guests here, still taking your calls for the next half hour. Right now, though, it's time for a CBC News update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Lytton officials say progress is starting to speed up in the rebuilding process. It has been 3 years since a fire tore through the village, killing 2 people and destroying homes and businesses. Lytton Mayor Denise O'Connor says she was frustrated with how slow things seemed to be moving initially, but that has been changing. Green MLA Adam Olsen has announced he will not run for re-election in the fall. Olsen has represented the riding of Saanich North and Island since 2017. He is one of only 2 sitting Green MLAs. And former Premier John Horgan is battling cancer for the 3rd time. Horgan is in hospital in Berlin, where he is serving as Canada's ambassador to Germany. Horgan, who is 64, was diagnosed with throat cancer 3 years ago. And now the forecast on the north coast. Cloudy this afternoon with a high of 15. Highs up to 20 with some sunshine and a risk of thunderstorms in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 22. Highs getting close to 30 with some sun and cloud in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 26. And some sun and cloud this afternoon in the Fraser Valley. Increasing cloudiness in Metro Vancouver and Greater Victoria, with highs up to 26 inland. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you so much. I did not watch the Stanley Cup final.
You didn't?
I did not.
Did.
You know, you did. I figured
Game 7.
you would because
Yes.
a Canucks bandwagoner. You have to really sell me on going forward.
It is
next
June.
team.
Yes, it is a little much.
And
Goes a little long.
Were you heartbroken?
No.
No.
Well, it was Edmonton losing. No, I can't get too heartbroken about that. I mean, sure, it would have been nice to have a Canadian team win, but it was a great game, and
Yeah.
it, was unlikely they would come back from 3-0.
There is that. It's so hard to come back from being down 3.
It is.
But they put on, just a great game and really rose the spirits of everyone in Edmonton. I know our one of our producers here, our colleague Julia Lipscomb, traveled back.
I
to
know. I saw her in the
Edmonton.
office this morning. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
effort.
Oh, I haven't seen her yet.
She's back.
Does
It was
she
a
look
quick
okay?
trip.
Does she look okay?
I think she's hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, she'll get over it.
Okay.
And Mark Fairfield, right? In the
That's
in
right.
the control room. He's a huge Oilers fan. Sorry, Mark.
He had a
hurts.
jersey on yesterday.
Yeah.
So we'll have to comfort the two of them.
We will.
Yeah. I love your use of tennis lingo, by the way. 3
Oh,
love.
you're welcome.
Always
Yeah,
the
sure,
tennis
sure.
reference.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here. We're live on CBC Radio 1, on CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app as well. Just go to the app. You can download it and hit video, and you can see us. But you can also watch us on YouTube and watch us on demand after that as well. Just hit CBC Vancouver. We're back here on BC Today, and we are talking about, yes, the fallout from yesterday's by-election in Toronto St. Paul. This was a federal Liberal stronghold. Well, that ended yesterday by a win by the Conservative candidate in that riding. And we're taking your calls. What do you think this means for the future of Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader? Does he need to step down before the next election? And what does this Conservative win mean for that party? Our numbers again, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. My guests are Rachel Siegel, former senior director with BC United and served in various policy roles in the Stephen Harper government, now founder and CEO of Beyond a Ballot. Amanda Alvaro is senior communications advisor to Justin Trudeau's Liberal leadership bid and his party's election campaign. Also now the president and co-founder of Pomp and Circumstance. They are co-hosts of a podcast called Beyond a Ballot. And we have reconnected with Tyler in Hope. Hi, Tyler.
Hi.
Thanks so much for calling. What do you think? What's the fallout from yesterday's by-election?
Well, first of all, if Trudeau doesn't think that, the polls are representative, I'd say just look at the by-election, right? So what Trudeau thinks and what is reality are two different things. I voted for Trudeau back in 2015. I'll never, ever vote Liberal or left again.
Why is that?
Because he did not follow through on his election promises, and he did so in a real sort of privileged, elite, condescending way. I'm not going to list them off, but I mean, let's look at the big picture. Look where we were back in 2014 under Harper. We didn't have crazy inflation. Canadian values were representative. Housing wasn't going crazy. Immigration wasn't rampant, right? The housing and immigration thing, it's has to be balanced, right? They're contradictory policies. And that's what the Liberals have been putting out. Crime's up, homeless drug encampments are up. This has all happened in the last, really got out of hand in the last 7 years.
And I'll just I take your point about you voted and now you say you would never vote Liberal again. I'm wondering, we had a caller earlier, Helena, who said there is a lot of kind of an echo chamber in social media, for example, and everything is kind of put onto Trudeau. When we had another caller say, well, Rod in Vancouver said inflation is a result of global factors. So how much of that do you think falls to him, and how much of it is a result of the times that we live in?
Yeah, so immigration accounts for 0.3% of inflation. So if we're at 3% inflation, immigration is 10% of that. The carbon tax is another 0.15% of that, right? It adds up, right? We need a government that wants to lower taxes for people, because the best way to reduce your carbon footprint is to put more money in the pockets of everyday people so they can afford to make those choices. Another one is, finally, China's we have access to potentially some cheap EVs, and the Canadian government is going to put tariffs on it. I know they're in a pickle with
for competition reasons,
manufacturing sector, but manufacturing has largely left the West and North America as we outsource it more and more, right? This guy, I always voted Liberal my whole life, but after a few years of him, never again, right? His policies, I don't think hold traditional Canadian values, and he's
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by traditional Canadian values?
I'm saying he sows division, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's firearms, whether it's indigenous matters. He sows division in the country. He's not one to, he when he originally ran, that his platform was to unite, and people joined into that. But he's not delivered on that. His policies are quite divisive.
I'm not.
Right? And his when you say about an echo chamber, his whole inner circle, Fraser, Philip Champagne there, Freeland, Anad, the lot of them, the Duclos, right? Bill Blair, they're all just the same person, pretty much.
Tyler, thank you so much for the call. I'm not going to go into, what your views are when it comes to LGBTQ rights and Indigenous rights and things like that. But I will follow up on your point about division. Amanda Alvaro, is that, does that represent a view of what, of the approach of the Liberal government under Trudeau to these more social values issues?
We don't hear that one very often, that Trudeau is sowing divisions particularly among those groups. I think that there are divisions in the country, and I think that there's been a level of toxicity in the rhetoric that has been used, aimed at each other, aimed at different parties. And some of that we see a bleed over effect from the US. And certainly we see more of this polarization between what is commonly referred to right-leaning and left-leaning politics. But I would disagree that a lot of that division comes from the Liberal Party. I think we've seen a lot of divisive language coming from the Conservative Party. I think a lot of people would agree with that. You may also agree that they're excellent communicators and their message is really resonating. But I do think that they've taken an uglier, nastier tone in politics than we've seen in the last 10 years.
What do you make of that, Rachel, that, around this, the social values part of the election rhetoric?
I think that Canadians are struggling. I think that Canadians are having a hard time affording food, obtaining housing. We've had issues with the legalization of drugs. We have seen crime spike on streets in all across the
You're
country.
talking about decriminalization.
Decriminalization, yep. We have seen crime rates just rise across the country. And so I think that Pierre Poilievre has done a great job of narrowing down for Canadians what their choice is. And that is someone who is going to fight for them. And I think Canadians had a lot of patience with Trudeau. They wanted him to come out and be a champion for them. And even today during his press conference, I wanted him to come out and say, this was a tough loss for me. Instead, he said, we're continuing to fight. But when Canadians don't feel that you're already fighting for them, that message is lost. And so I think that right now Canadians are looking for that champion, that person to really go to Ottawa and help them with their pocketbooks, with their housing, with the crime on streets. And Pierre Poilievre is making that very simple with his messaging, with his proposition to Canadians, which is axe the tax, build the houses, all of his slogans. But I think that it's an interesting way of thinking about Trudeau right now, especially after this by-election. I think there's going to be a lot more reflection from the Liberal camp on why he isn't resonating anymore. Because that caller was right. In 2015, he was the one bringing people together. He was bringing massive crowds out to rallies around issues like marijuana, like electoral reform. Where are those issues now? What is he running on? Because I'm very clear in what the Conservatives are. And last night we saw that message resonate with voters.
But when you have, back to the social conservative, social values debate, you have an MP will post something or make a comment about, let's say, same-sex marriage, and you'll get the statement from Pierre Poilievre saying, they don't represent the positions of the Conservative Party. But is there enough of those views that may roll back rights for people, for marginalized people, that I guess, are those concerns warranted when it comes to the Conservatives?
I think Pierre has been very clear on his position on same-sex marriage, on access to abortion. He came out and he shut down any speculation on that a couple of weeks ago. I've personally known Pierre for many, many years, and I know that what was said in that podcast that you're referring to, I believe, is not reflective of the party that he wants to lead. It's not reflective of the legislation that will come out of a Pierre Poilievre government. But I think also, just going back to what I was saying, people are struggling every day, and that's what Canadians want their leadership to be talking about. The cost of groceries, the lineups at food banks. I mean, we're in a real crisis, and blame who you want for the economy. Canadians are feeling this every day, and they want someone to help them.
Let's take another call now here. And so let me just ask you, Amanda, how is it going to be about the economy then? That's what Rachel is referring to here, that Pierre Poilievre has really hammered down on that affordability message. Is it going to boil down to that issue?
Well, usually in elections, we find that there are a couple of wedge issues that dominate the election, and I imagine that affordability will be one of them. But Poilievre has spent a lot of time attacking, a lot of time saying what's not working, what he doesn't like in the Trudeau government. He hasn't been forced to say what he does stand for, who he is, what he's going to bring to government. So he's going to have to give a lot more than a few fancy slogans in order to convince Canadians that there's substance under those words.
Did you want to respond?
I just think that we've seen in the House, the Conservatives put forward a lot of motions that are really principled stances. In reference to the by-election last night, take, for example, the Gaza and Israel motion, which was something that they voted against while every other party voted in favor of it, and that played out in the polls. So I think that there isn't an election platform in front of Canadians right now, but there are basic tenets of what Pierre Poilievre and a conservative government under his leadership would stand for. And I think that that's a lot more than the Liberals are putting forward right now.
Okay, I can see we can go back and forth on this. I can see why you have a podcast together. Let's take another call, though. Shiv is on the line in Burnaby. Hi, Shiv.
Hi, how are you doing?
I am fine. Thanks for calling. What do you think? What does the by-election result mean for Trudeau's future, and what does it mean for the Conservative Party?
I think it's beyond a wake-up call, right? Communications is not going to cut it, and this government has been apathetic for at least for the past year and a half, right? We've seen increasing crime, increasing racism, especially here in BC, and for most part, this government has been aloof, right? And I'm a Liberal volunteer. I've helped them several times in the past couple of election campaigns, and this time I'm going to vote Conservative. I think I've reached my patience. I'm not seeing the kind of love or the promises being fulfilled here, especially in BC. And every time they introduce a new program, it's always deferred. It's like 2026. I mean, I'm not going to wait till 2026. You're in power right now. I want things done right now.
Do you mean on what issues?
Whether it's dental care or permanent transit funds or housing, every new program they bring up, it's either there's people are excluded, it's not universal, or it's deferred to like some other future date, right? Like the permanent transit fund. We could have, BC could have used those extra $1 billion, then we could have built that extension all the way to UBC. The province could have benefited from those permanent transit funds.
So it's about funding for this province.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing, but it's just a series of just apathetic decisions with just patronizing behavior that's kind of like pushing people away.
And yourself, Shiv, thank you very much for the call.
Thank you for taking me.
Shiv in Burnaby. Ali is up next in Vancouver. Hi, Ali. Hi there, Ali. Are you there? Okay, I'm not sure we have Ali on the line in Vancouver. Let's move to Jivan in Campbell River. Hi, Jivan.
Hey, good morning.
Yeah, what do you think?
So from Burnaby to Vancouver to Campbell River, so you're getting a real BC feeling
yes.
about how we feel here.
It's true.
But yeah, as far as the by-election, I just think it's a sign that people are losing trust in Trudeau, like even in his statement this morning and Freeland's statement today. They both brought up how they need to work hard to, build trust. And I think it's too late. I think with their lack of transparency, with the studies that came out regarding the true cost of the carbon tax for Canadians, I think that really showed that there is a lack of transparency. And as far as foreign interference, with the sworn secrecy for anybody who wants to read the report and muzzling anyone to an extent who views the report, I think
that's legal, though, right? That's a legal requirement.
Oh, yeah, but as far as saying how many members were potentially in the House, like MPs, like not giving specifics for names, but giving a little bit more detail or speaking to how serious it is. I mean, Canadians really take it seriously. And I don't think that Canadians really but I think it's a double-edged sword. I also do know that there is political fatigue with any party. that's been in power as long as the Liberals have been. So I do realize it's like they're facing a double whammy with, the carbon tax negatively affecting so many Canadians, as well as, just being in power for so long. I think Canadians are ready for a change. I think it might be too late for them to turn the ship around, and I think this is a good indication of that.
Jivan, thank you so much for your call.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for taking us to Campbell River. Boyd is next. Oh, we're heading east now to the Kootenays at Cranbrook. Hi, Boyd.
Hi.
Hi, and what do you think of the by-election results and what that means for Justin Trudeau's future and for the Conservative Party?
Well, I think it speaks volumes, and I think there's a few people that made comments before. Yeah, the Canadian people have lost confidence in Trudeau. His scandals, he can't answer questions. They're tired of it, and people. This is a guy who's out of touch with Canadians.
Is that how you feel?
Yes, absolutely. He's a lady made a comment about being a pretty boy. He has been silver spooned his whole life. He's not an honest working Canadian like the rest of us that are struggling, and he doesn't see that.
Okay.
And nobody trusts him.
Boyd, thank you very much. And that was Helena calling earlier, and I think she was referring to what the perception of him was on social media. But thanks very much for the call. Gian is up next in Vancouver. Hi, Gian.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for calling.
For my opinion, I think as a Iranian and diaspora that I feel like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau really failed us in a really big time. For example, the way he treats IRGC after 6 years, or
the Iran.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have a lot of problem with letting IRGC and their affiliate and lobbyists work in Canada. And I think especially as diaspora, like a lot of us, it would take us for a while to realize about the policy making in Canada. And by the time we realize like it's not the right way that liberals voting. They say they're standing for newcomers and diaspora, but at the same time, whatever they're doing is horrible. What's happening back in our countries.
And so you're wanting more accountability, specifically on the IRGC and for the victims of the families of the victims of the Ukrainian International Airlines flight.
Yeah, of course, and it's not just that. It's not just them. It's a whole group. Like we are, to be honest, it's sad to say, but Canadian citizenship becoming so cheap for mullah regime in Iran. They can buy it, come here, start a business, buy places, and they bring the dirty money of oil to this Canada, and they using the privilege of freedom and everything. We have mass murder, like this is not hyperbole. That one of the judges that killed 30,000 people in Iran, their daughters living here, working like free in the best university and best life they can do. And this is not fair to like other Canadians. We didn't come to Canada to bring our problems to here, and now we have to fear for our life that maybe one of these IRGCs that they may follow us and attack us, and they say you can't talk about that or you cannot talk about this or that.
It goes back again to those issues around foreign interference as well. Gian, thank you very much for that specific issue that you wanted to talk about there. I want to start wrapping up here, and I'll ask you, Rachel. We've heard a lot about this frustration with Trudeau, right? That he's let me down. I did vote for him. That was what Tyler said. But to Amanda's point earlier, when is Poilievre going to need to actually, really sell his own policies and his own approach to governing, as opposed to essentially banking on, fueling anger at Trudeau?
I've worked on a lot of campaigns across Canada, and I would actually say, to his credit, Pierre has put out a framework of an election campaign, which we don't usually see so far in advance. I think as we get closer, we'll see more breakdowns on what the specifics are under those big slogans that we're hearing all the time. But again, the Conservatives have come out as very principled, even talking about the IRGC, which was a decision of the Trudeau government this past Friday. That was something that was pushed by the Conservatives for the last 6 years. Finally, the Liberals decided to do it right on the eve of this by-election for reasons that people are wondering why, in terms of the timing. But I think that one of the callers was talking about trust. And for me, the interesting part of this story here today is the trust of Trudeau's caucus. Because one of the things that I think about is, how does he move forward from this? And if I was a Liberal cabinet minister today, I'd be thinking, will the Prime Minister be able to get me over the line in a general election? And so
you're saying there's time for Poilievre to do that, to answer those questions about his specific policy?
Absolutely, and we'll see more from Trudeau as well.
Okay, and that's what I'm going to ask Amanda as we wrap here. Is that what he's going to need to do over the course of the next year and a half?
Yeah, I think, what I heard today from a lot of callers was like a lot around broken promises and feeling like they lost trust. And I think that Trudeau, who has had to respond repeatedly to Poilievre's attacks, needs to now take a little bit of the offense to say, here are the things that we brought, whether it's $10 a day childcare, dental care, pharmacare, a lot of the things that we will talk about over the next number of months. Remind Canadians what's at stake. Force Poilievre to have to say not just what he's against, well, what is he for? What does he stand for? Because he voted against those things. So will he take away $10 a day childcare? Will he take away pharmacare? Will he take away dental care? These are the questions that Canadians need to start asking. And frankly, these are the questions that the Liberal Party needs to start posing.
Really good to have you both. Thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Amanda Alvaro and Rachel Siegel.